Welcome to Inside the Courtroom, the Daybell trial. We are glad you are here with us. We are going to kind of recap the last 7 days of testimony, the things that we have heard in the courtroom. Of course, remember, we are in the Ada County Courthouse for the Chad Daybell trial. It was moved here to Ada County to allow for a better jury selection, so more people in that jury pool. So they seated the jury, and now we have had 7 days of testimony in the Chad Daybell trial. So the first days were really the prosecutors setting the scene, setting the stage for the case that they are going to present. So they wanted to set a timeline for jurors. They spent a lot of time talking about when certain things happened, how they happened, their assumption of what they want jurors to believe. They talked about that in their opening statements. They talked about this case really being one of sex, money, greed, religious power. These are the same arguments we heard a year ago when Chad Daybell's wife, Lori Vallow, was on trial and was convicted of murder and conspiracy to commit murder. So these are arguments that we have heard, evidence that we have heard, really nothing new being presented so far. These are the exact same pieces of evidence and pieces of information that we heard a year ago in the trial. But what is unique and what is different here is that this is the first time these jurors are hearing this testimony. And they are looking at it very differently than what the jurors in Lori Vallow's case would have been looking for. So here, as spectators, we're allowed to see the exact same information, same testimony, and look at it through a different lens, which is interesting to see how Chad Daybell's defense team is setting up their strategy. It sounds like they are going to try to say that it was Lori Vallow who pursued Chad Daybell. It was Lori who called the shots. In fact, they said that it was his former wife, his late wife, Tammy Daybell, who ran the publishing part of his job. He was an author. He had published some books. And so they say it was his former wife who was in charge of that and kind of ran the show. And then Lori Vallow comes along and they say that she sort of pursued him. So it's interesting, they're painting him, the defendant here, as somebody who was somewhat controlled by others. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out and what testimony the defense team plans to offer to further support that. But what we saw this week was we saw detectives, law enforcement take the stand and talk about what they found on Chad Daybell's property in Rexburg when they unearthed those two bodies of J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan. It was gruesome testimony, very difficult for people to listen to, for people to see those photos, because we're talking about two children who were found dead and buried on Chad Daybell's property. We also saw for the first time the video taken from the backseat of a patrol car, where right after Chad Daybell was arrested, right outside of his home, we saw him in the back of the patrol car talking to his daughter and talking about how he was going to be behind bars for a long time. He didn't expect that he would be out of custody, out of police custody anytime soon. So interesting to see that for the first time. That was the only thing new, really, that has been presented so far in this trial. New meaning not already presented a year ago during Lori Vallow Daybell's trial. The other thing they played, and this is something that we heard a year ago, but what they played was that patriarchal blessing. Now, this is a blessing that Chad gave to Lori Vallow's brother, Alex Cox. Now, if you remember, Alex Cox is a name that comes up a lot. He was Lori's protector, and you'll hear that in this blessing. Well, listen in as Chad Daybell delivers this message to Alex and thanks him, talks about him being a warrior, and saying that he's protected his sister and that he's already done lots to help them.
I want to begin by opening up the portals of time and going back to your previous creations in which you've lived. I see you on the third creation as a valiant warrior fighting for truth and righteousness, always seeking to do what is right. Then you progressed and were selected by the Savior himself to be part of the fourth creation. Great warriors were needed in that creation. Powerful goddesses were needed to be protected, and you were selected to help protect your sister. And you helped her in numerous probations as a defender. You have a special bond even from the premortal world. You connected there. And as she grew in power, you were right there beside her, always. With a humble heart. You both always were so humble. So as this fifth creation began, after you had been exalted in the fourth creation, when you could have gone on to exaltation with Holly, resurrected being, you accepted the Savior's invitation one more time to come to this mortal realm, to condescend as a God. You help us. You have already assisted us in ways that can never be repaid. But you will continue to do so as you move forward in this.
Already assisted us in ways that we can never repay. You hear those words there, words like valiant warrior, selected, exalted. This was what Chad Daybell called a patriarchal blessing, and yet members of the Church of the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints says that isn't something that Chad Daybell was able to provide. He did not have the status or the calling from the church to be able to provide that. So they say this wasn't a credible blessing, if you will. But it sounds like he was trying to thank Alex for his work, but also say that because of what you've done for us, you are now have a higher status. You will be looked upon favorably by what he is talking about, their Lord. And so it is interesting in terms of what was he trying to communicate to Alex. He goes on, now this is a long blessing and we're only playing portions of it. You can find all of it online at ktvb.com, but we're playing portions of it to show you, hoping to get sort of inside and understand the mindset of what this was intended to do. What was Chad Daybell trying to communicate? What did he want Alex Cox to take away from this? Remember that it wasn't too long after this blessing that Alex Cox passed away. It was in December in Arizona, December of 2019 in Arizona. Police did rule that, or medical examiners did rule that that was a natural cause, death by natural causes. So what's interesting is then what happens next. And you'll hear the end of this blessing where Chad goes on to continue talking to Alex Cox about his status and about what happens next.
After many years of service in such ways, as the second coming approaches, you will know when it's time to move to the other side. This body that has served you well will lay down one day, and you'll pass. Your spirit will leave this body. You'll be greeted wholeheartedly and welcomed by the Savior himself. You will already know him. But that reunion will take place on a greater plane. That the spirit, you'll feel at that time, the vibration will exceed all. Before the second coming even occurs, the Savior will let that body rest a day or two, and much like himself, you will be raised and be resurrected, so that when the Savior does return, you will be right at the front of that amazing team of angels that will sweep the earth. Much like described in the renewed earth, you will be there. It will bring you great joy to help Mother Earth transfer to a terrestrial realm, to burn away the celestial refuse. At that time, you and Holly will still have assignments here temporarily, but then you will move forward. She's already preparing a world for you two, and you will be able to be an eternal family with eternal children on that earth. And the glory will just continue for you, Al, on and on through eternity.
The glory will continue for you. He talks about the second coming. It's approaching. And in that, you hear him, Chad Daybell, who was there, you were listening to him deliver this, what he called a patriarchal blessing over Alex Cox, which is Lori Vallow, Daybell's brother. He passed away in December of 2019 in Arizona, but this was the blessing given to him a short time before that death. Alex Cox is someone who has been tied to every single one of the situations that Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow have found themselves in. So the death of Lori's husband, former husband or late husband, Charles Vallow, Alex Cox says he shot and killed him in self-defense. There is certainly some speculation and some concern from Charles Vallow's family, also law enforcement officials talking about the investigation into that death, wondering was it in fact self-defense. And we've heard some of the testimony about that case. Of course, that's not what they are on trial for now, not what Chad Daybell is facing, but it does come up in terms of understanding the relationship between Chad and Lori, when it started, how it started. Again, the defense attorneys certainly painting the picture that it was Lori Vallow who was the one who wooed Chad Daybell and really pursued him and took an interest in him very early on when they met at conferences talking about the end of the world and the second coming of Christ. So that's how they're going to paint this picture. Now, we did hear from Melanie Gibb. Now, she was a friend of Chad Daybell's, eventually also became a friend of Lori Vallow's. She got on the stand and she talked about the interactions between the couple and her when Tylee and JJ were missing. She says she didn't know that the kids were missing when Chad and Lori called her and asked her to lie to police. So I want you to listen in. After Melanie decides that she has had a change of heart and wants to make sure that law enforcement knows the truth, that she does not have JJ with her, even though she had told law enforcement earlier that JJ was with her, the 7-year-old who was missing, she said she had him because Lori had asked her to. She said she had a change of heart, later told police, he's not with me. In fact, I don't know where he is. I haven't seen him. A short time later, Melanie said she wanted to get the couple on a recording. She wanted to ask them what was going on, where JJ was, what was happening. She didn't feel good about what was going on. She recorded this conversation, a conversation that was played in court.
Tammy had been getting weaker and sick, and I begged her to go to the doctor. Her heart was failing her. She was physically falling apart, but she hates doctors, and she just passed away. That's how it happened. My son Garth was right there with me the whole time. My kids were at the house within 20 minutes of her passing. There were 2 coroners. They checked her out right there on the bed. All these conspiracy theories just make me sick to my stomach. Just absolutely sick. I know I've been told for years that Tammy would pass away at a young age. And I had no idea that Lori would even be a part of my life. I just knew that my life had 2 segments. And that I know Tammy's on a special mission and she's with my kids. She's visited them. There's so much, Melanie, that you just have to have faith. And this is not some sort of master plan. There's no way Lori and I should ever come up with this.
That was the portion of the call where Melanie was kind of challenging Chad about what had happened to his wife. Now, his wife, Chad reported that his wife died in her sleep. It was October 19th of 2019. He reported that she had passed away. He woke up and found her not breathing, unresponsive. He quickly had called for help. They had medical examiners there, but her body was cremated very shortly, within days of her death. And it wasn't until later, months later, where police started to become suspicious about Tammy's death. They exhumed her body and went through further testing, determined she did not die of natural causes and instead died because of asphyxiation, so suffocation. That is why Chad Daybell is on trial for her murder. We have not heard a lot of details about how prosecutors believe her death happened, or what happened in the house the night that she was killed. There has been some speculation that Alex Cox was in the area, was near their home. Could he have been responsible or partially responsible? Again, he is no longer living, so not that we are going to be able to find out a lot about that, but it will be interesting to see if prosecutors bring forth any new evidence that we didn't see during Lori Vallow's trial to maybe help explain a little bit more about Tammy Daybell's death. So Melanie Gibb took the stand. She was on the stand for several days. She talked about that relationship with this couple. She talked about being, in that phone call, she talked about being upset by the fact that she had been asked to lie for them. But she was hoping to get information from them, and they did not share much. They told her that they couldn't tell her where JJ was. This is the 7-year-old, Lori Vallow, Charles Vallow's adopted child, JJ, who was 7. There was no discussion about Tylee in that phone call, but Melanie said that she and Tylee did not have a relationship. All she knew was that Lori and Chad had talked about both JJ and Tylee, along with Chad's wife, Tammy, as being dark spirits. They described them as being dark. They used the word zombie. And if you remember, this is really what is at the heart of this case, is that this couple presented to people that there were people that were light and were dark. And if someone were dark, then they could no longer be on this earth and function. And so the idea is that these 3 people, their life cut short because they had been deemed by Chad and Lori as being dark or having evil spirits. And so it will be interesting to see as the prosecution goes on, how they further that testimony. The more that we hear about Chad's mindset, kind of what his role was in each of these deaths. The kids were found dead on his property in Rexburg, and of course his wife found dead in their bed there at their home in Rexburg as well. So all 3 deaths very closely tied to Chad Daybell. Lori Vallow, Daybell, his wife, was convicted a year ago, and so she now has been sentenced to prison without the possibility of parole. If Chad Daybell is convicted, he could face the death penalty. That is still on the table. So if convictions happen here, then it will be up to jurors to decide if the death penalty is appropriate or not, and that will essentially start another trial of this, or another phase of this trial, where they will determine the sentence and if the death penalty is appropriate. So we're going to continue to follow this case. It is expected to go another 6 to 8 weeks, so it is going to be a longer trial than what we saw in Lori Daybell's trial, assuming that it continues on for as long as they have predicted so far. So we do expect to hear even more about evidence on Tammy's death, more about the timelines, and when this couple was together, how quickly they went from Tammy's death to being married in Hawaii. All of that expected to play out. So it is a convoluted case. It is a very complex case, but we are going to be here to help piece together all of that from start to finish. And so we hope you will continue to join us here on Inside the Courtroom, the Chad Daybell trial.